started. Okay, we're live.
You're live, okay. Okay, let's see, I'm not on mute. Good morning, everybody. And thank you all for joining us this morning. I hope that all is well and that each of you are staying safe. As you all know, we are still in the throes of navigating our existence among this COVID pandemic and doing the best we can to stay sane and at the same time hopeful that all things will change sooner than later. And so much has transpired both on our campus and in our nation since we had the January meeting. As you can see, we have a robust agenda for today. If you can see the agenda that Emily sent out along with the minutes. And we also have two invited guests in Dr. Travis Albritton from the School of Social Work and Chief Perry from UNC's Public Safety. And we'll also have an update from our commission member, Dr. Kim Strom-Gottfried. But first, Frank and I wanted to give you a brief overview of what the remainder of our meetings will be and how they will unfold for the remainder of the semester. Our goal is to ensure that each meeting will reflect the issues, the concerns, and events present on our campus. It is for this reason that we sent each commission member an email regarding attendance and engagement. We need your voice, your presence, and your input to help move our agenda items forward. So today's agenda will address the hate crime and vandalism on our campus, a new hire to manage the interpersonal violence, and a presentation on student belonging and emotional safety. That's for today. In March, we will have a full and detailed update on all areas of the UNC Police Public Safety and progress on the search for the Provost and Chief Diversity Officer for Equity and Inclusion. That's going to be in March. In April, the Campus Safety Commission will sponsor a collaborative event with the School of Social Work, Dr. Travis Albritton, and hopefully one or two other entities on campus, and we'll talk more about that. And in May, we will draft and present the Campus Safety Commission's annual report on the work we've done this year. But as we all know, most of the meetings for this year have been about COVID, and it's taken a large part of our meeting time, but the other committee areas will also be highlighted. And in order for us to do that, we have to get, working and to create more information surrounding each of those areas so that we will have a more robust annual report to submit to the Chancellor. So this is where we are right now, but again, I'm going to have to reiterate, we need your input, your engagement, and your participation. So nothing is etched in stone in as far as what we have going forward, but we certainly do need your input. And this is just a blueprint of how we're going to move forward with the rest of the semester. And so having said that, is there anything else anybody would like to add during this time? If not, we'll move to the approval of the minutes.
Devetta, or Frank, do we need to vote on the Constitution that Josh put together, or does that pass by it? I mean, I think he did a great job.
We will need to
discuss that. Yeah, but we have to discuss it first. We sent that out to everybody and to discuss it before we do anything further with that.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so that's further down in the agenda.
Gotcha.
Okay. So we each received a copy of our January minutes. Is there a motion on the floor to accept the minutes?
I so move.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. So there's been second and approved. The motion has been approved, properly seconded. All in favor, raise your hands or say aye.
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 Any opposed? Wonderful. Thank you. The motion is carried and the January minutes have been approved. As we move forward on the agenda, the next, the open comments. Are there any open comments or any updates that anybody would like to share with us this morning before we move into the reports? I do, at least. Wonderful news. I don't know if anybody else knew that Desiree Reckenberg is not here. She's taking some time off. She's had a new little bundle of joy added to her family. Her name is Helen, and she said it's okay if we announce that she's had this little new addition. So we all congratulate Desiree. And yay! And we have some good news from Letitia, our commission member, who's been nominated to present her honors thesis. Letitia, can you share a little bit about that?
Yes, ma'am. So I was nominated by UNC School of Nursing to present my senior honors thesis. My research topic was psychosocial factors and cardiovascular disease risk factors in young African American women. So I will be presenting my work and findings on the systematic literature review that I conducted at the Rising Stars of Research and Scholarship poster program for Sigma Theta Tau's conference in February. And just some background, Sigma Theta Tau is the only national honor society for nursing. So I'm really excited to present my work.
We're so happy.
Congratulations.
That's
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
That's a real honor. That's fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Are there any other updates or anybody would like to add anything during this time?
I would like to mention the Rogers Eubanks Neighborhood Association of Food Distribution Program that we do every third Friday of the month. We were fortunate enough to partner up with the UNC Athletic Department. We was able to give enough substance to the resident of Orange County and surrounding neighborhoods to do over 12,000 meals. We was able to reach over 1,200 households between March to December of 2020. And we are continuing that right on through 2021. Anyone that wants to volunteer to help us come out on the 19th of this month. We'll start putting all the boxes and everything together the week of, and we'll start distributing the items starting at 10 a.m. And we usually target 3:30 p.m. as the end time, but we have been so overwhelmed that we usually run out somewhere between 1:30 and 2 o'clock. And there have been a greater demand for assistance. So if any way that you can come out and help us in this cause, we appreciate it.
Thank you for that report, Robert, and the wonderful work that you're doing in a very needed and necessary area. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other updates or comments? If not, we can move right into our first update, and coming from our Chief Perry, update on the hate crime and any other information you think that would be helpful to us as a commission.
Thank you, Davetta. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. Good morning, committee. Good morning, everyone. As you all are aware, on January 24th in the early afternoon hours, UNCPD responded to a call about a burglary and apparent vandalism within the Campus Y. One of our newer officers, minority officers, responded. She's been with us about a year and a half, was compiling the information, compiling the damage, but did not really focus on the importance of the anti-Semitic markings and other things, and that didn't get immediately transmitted to her supervisor at that time. Upon the completion of that report, or as she left that scene, I received a call from Vice Chancellor Amy Johnson for Student Affairs, and just so happened I was on campus attending another event with student athletes. I immediately left that event, went over to the Campus Y myself, took 2 additional officers and re-examined the Campus Y, and you could tell that there was something that occurred within that space. Things were disheveled, food was open, and there were some still markings on a dry erase board. And I knew that there was more to that initial call that had happened. We activated our investigative team that's on call. They immediately came out, started reviewing that scene and using any information that was available to identify a suspect, and we quickly identified one. Used all of the tools that were available to us. In the very next day, within hours, we had 2 arrest warrants for this suspect. We did ask and inquire about the hate crime piece. We were informed by the district attorney that until we interview this suspect, we're not able to apply that hate crime charge because there has to be at least one person that's targeted, and hopefully through an interview or additional information, we can obtain that. After an exhaustive 2.5, 3-day search for this subject with active arrest warrants, we did learn of his location. It's within a medical facility at this time. We're not going to infringe on that process that's taking place. But we are working with the law enforcement agency within that jurisdiction. We have an agreement that before this suspect is discharged, we'll be notified and they'll be taken into custody. And so we'll alert our campus community when that subject is taken into custody on the 2 active arrest warrants. We've done a lot since the investigation. We've availed ourselves to conduct an even more detailed review of the Campus Y for their safety and security protocols. In November of 2020, we conducted a security assessment. So not long ago, just a few months ago, we had already conducted a safety assessment of that location and made recommendations. Those were working their way through because of budgetary issues and other challenges, but I know they're going to be accelerated because I personally spoke with Mr. Darius Dixon, who's helping with a door of some concern, and we're going to look at any other enhancement that we can provide to that campus-wide to enhance the safety and security, to include training and personal safety tips for any student or employee who just has safety concerns. So we're still actively engaged. I'm scheduled to attend a listening session with the employees this week, along with the counseling center. And so we're connected. We've been doing walkthroughs twice a day, one at the beginning of the shift and one at the end, just to check in with staff and provide a presence. And so I'm very connected to Ms. Ramos and Vice Chancellor Johnson in this ongoing investigation. So I'll stop there and take any questions that anyone may have.
Chief, I need to ask, is there any particular reason do you think that the Campus Y was targeted? That's number one. Was there any word of mouth information on the person, or was it all via security cameras? Number two, and yeah, that would be it for now.
Okay. We had no information leading up to why this location was targeted, but of course, social media is a very rich resource, and in examining the suspects on social media, it appears they have harbored these feelings and posted other similar hateful remarks and comments that kind of correlate with the behavior and some of the actions that were done within the Campus Y.
Okay.
Does that help substantiate the hate crime nature, or does that have to come from your interview?
It has to come from the interview, just because those things were seen on social media. He did not call out that specific office. He didn't target a specific employee or an individual. And so that's what we're going to aim for during our interview of that suspect, if he's willing to cooperate.
Chief, an information question about that law. Let's say hypothetically somebody bombed or attacked a building that was known to house, Muslims or Jews or people of a particular background, but they weren't targeting a specific individual. Is that a hate crime?
So in your scenario, we would work with the FBI in terms of a bombing. That would be under a federal statute.
Okay, but I mean, what some kind of attack, I don't want to change the subject, but I mean, if it was a group rather than a person, is that a hate crime?
Yeah, in North Carolina, we've been directed by the district attorney that an individual has to be targeted in order to apply that charge. And so we'll continue to work with Mr. Woodall on that.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. And then my other question was, in this particular case, was it specifically and exclusively kind of targeted on the Jewish community, or was it broader than that against many communities?
I think it was an attack on all of us. It was an attack on our space, on our campus, in that facility, and there was no specific group of people, in my opinion, targeted from what I saw, because there were, horrible markings on a whiteboard that involved a different race. There was this disturbing damage within an office, opening cans, shredding papers, even alleged, the subject is alleged to have taken personal mail or other documents belonging to all employees. So there was no specific target for a specific group in that case.
Thank you.
Was the campus-wise typically an open building? I don't know if that was the case. Was that the case in this current instance? And internally, offices were locked. Did the individual breach those offices forcibly, or do they have access by some other means?
So we're still investigating the status of all the offices. Some were open and some doors were secure. Some of the office spaces were unlocked. We did not see a door kicked in or the frame kicked off the hinge or broken. So we're still reviewing the internal protocols of the staff and what they used to close their offices when they left that facility. So that's still under review.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Chief, has there been any effort to speak with the feds about the North Carolina ethnic intimidation law? You know, when you don't have, you got to have a specific victim. I think they're right about the North Carolina law. The most serious charges, it sounds like you might have under state law, will be a breaking and entering type situation. The federal statutes provide some much more serious action, I think, on this area. Have you made any effort to speak with anyone from the FBI? I know their plate's full all the time, but this is a highly visible case.
Right. As soon as we heard about the anti-Semitic markings, I thought about and asked about the ethnic intimidation statute. And we immediately conferred with the district attorney staff, and I said, these were the most applicable charges right now. Should we get any additional information to enhance those charges or perhaps work with our federal partners, we are more than willing to do so. But he thought the felony burglary charge and the misdemeanor vandalism charge were most appropriate at this moment. But it's not off the table, Brainy.
Right.
Kim and then Eric.
Oh, Eric, you go first. I've already asked. I'll ask after Eric.
So Chief, thank you for the presentation. I just have a question that I could look up, I suppose, but I'm going to ask you instead because I'm lazy. So I'm just thinking about the applicability of North Carolina's law. And it just seems to me like there's probably a boundary. I mean, if you have a building and a space that is occupied by students of color and Jewish students, and racist and anti-Semitic symbols are placed into their workspace, it's a little bit unclear to me why that would be, like, they don't need to have it doesn't have to have a swastika with somebody's name written on it. Or it doesn't have to be sort of a swastika that's sent in the mail to a particular individual. I'm just having a little bit of trouble understanding why the placement of symbols of that kind in a space that is occupied by members of the groups targeted by those symbols does not rise to the level of whatever the culpability is that the law requires.
I joined you in the same questions. As I said, we wanted to use that charge initially and asked for it initially, but were refused. And so we can only apply the laws that the district attorney allows us to.
Yeah.
Well, let me just check statute. It's 14-401.14. It's a very specific statute. Like I say, it doesn't have a lot of teeth. It's just a misdemeanor. And I mean, it refers specifically to attacking someone, basically a particular individual or another, I think is the way the wording is. So like I say, the DA is not giving you bad information. That's the way, it just happens to be the way the North Carolina statute is written.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm reading the statute and I read it differently, but I'm not currently a prosecutor, so I should shut my mouth.
OJ?
Yeah, Chief, so given the history of the campus, why I think many people on campus, when we first heard the news, assumed it was obviously a hate crime. But I guess my question is, Are there, you talked about the security assessment that you did of the campus Y. Are there any such security assessments of other possible targets on campus, given the nature of that this may have been, and some of the suggestions and or recommendations that have to do with other ethnic and or minority spaces?
So we are sensitive to multiple key locations on campus. We have not received any other requests since I've arrived, but we've conducted multiple safety and security assessments at locations that we felt are very important to review. That's why we had just recently conducted one at the Campus Y in November of 2020. We're open to doing additional assessments and making sure that the technology and those safety protocols are appropriate. But more important than that, OJ, that staff are trained and that they take the basic protocols of securing their doors, reporting any kind of failures in locks and mechanisms. Typically, after something happens, we hear about a door that never closed or a window that never locked, but we want to work, proactively on the front side of those. And so I'm open to working with leaders at other sensitive areas if they have any concerns. I have a staff of 3 who are trained in CPTED, crime prevention, training by environmental design to go out and do those assessments, but they're only as good as the recommendations are followed up on, because we provide very good recommendations, but not all are typically followed up on, especially in a timely manner. And there's a number of reasons why, but the training is key in making sure that the staff do follow up on those assessment recommendations.
Thank
So
you.
those spaces have to get with your office to make a request.
Make a request, right? Unless there's a reverse order. If we receive any kind of concerning intelligence that an area, let's just take ROTC for example. In years past, we had received information from federal resources that ROTC programs were of concern. We went out and were proactive to do site assessments at those, but we've not received any intelligence targeting any other spaces like that on campus. But if we receive those, we will definitely work them in for an assessment.
Thank you.
So 2 questions, Chief. One is, are there any things that we need to include in our recommendations? I know that there's a lot of deferred maintenance on campus, and do we need to help? Are there problems in getting the fixes done that we can be of help with? That's one question. I'll just put them out both out and then you can answer. And then the other is in regard to the officer who did the initial survey of the scene and sort of missed cues. Does that suggest a particular training and what's happening in that space?
So one, if there's additional need, I will be reporting back to you all on the progress as it relates to some of the needed deferred maintenance in the area of safety and security, some of the consolidation that's needed in the area of our CCTV systems and our card access. As you know, we have disparate systems, and that's an area that is of high concern and very high liability for us. So I'll continue to provide reports back to you all on the committee that was formed, on their progress, and how we're moving forward to secure this location. As it relates to training, I did provide training last night. I stayed until about 7:30, conducted a Zoom from my office, but then went over to where the officers meet and check on to remind them about the importance of being detailed and reporting these incidents immediately to their supervisor. You probably don't recall, but in 2019 and late 2019, we had some stickers that were posted around campus on light poles and some other areas, and officers reported that timely, immediately. So I think it was a training issue for this officer. As I said, they were with us for about a year and a couple of months on their own, released. Did a great report about the vandalism and the damage, but needed to really focus in on the anti-Semitic language and some of the other cues that were there. So we'll continue to provide that training, and I in fact reiterated it last night to the shift that was working.
Thank you.
OJ, your hand is still up. You have any other thing to say, OJ? Your hand is still up.
No, I think it was up from the last time. I didn't take it down.
Okay.
I apologize.
Okay. Well, Chief, that was a very detailed, we really appreciate that detailed report and look forward to you bringing forward any additional information that you have to this commission so that we can understand better and know what we need to do as a commission.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Forgive me, I do have a question. In regards of the medical condition, that it is not one of these psychotic episodes that would diminish the severity of this incident, so that lesser charge are alleged against this individual, because we do know that sometimes the best and the quickest way to get out of something is pretend that you have a psychotic incident, and that's why this was done. If there's no pre-record of psychotic emotion disorder, how will we move forward to the severity of this charge?
Mr. Campbell, thank you for your question. And what I will tell you is that as soon as this person is discharged, we will effect our arrest warrants. So we plan on moving forward with our criminal case and use the evidence and the information that we've received and let the district attorney sort everything else out. But we have no intentions on changing our charges or reducing them or taking any other posture in this case.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Frank, did you have anything to say? I thought you were about to say something.
No, I'm just listening to the chief. It's very helpful.
Okay. Well, if there's no other information or questions, we can move to the next item on the agenda, and that is to the Senior Prevention Strategy Officer for Interpersonal Violence. That's one of our subcommittee areas, and so Kim serves as one of the search committee members for this position. So, Kim, the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Yeah, Brandy and I are the two stalwarts on the subcommittee. The university, and I think one of the roles that the commission was able to play, either by causation or correlation, getting this position unstuck in the midst of the hiring freeze. The position that's being hired is the Senior Prevention Strategy Officer / Director of Interpersonal Violence Prevention Collaborative. That person will need a long business card. It's an EHRA non-faculty position. I had concerns about, and so I represent the commission on the search committee. The search committee is chaired by Katie Nolan, and has folks like Elby Klein, who chairs the advisory committee for violence prevention. It's Beth Monaco, two students, clinician from Campus Health, and et cetera. So I will say, and I've said this to Frank and Devetta, and I've said it to the committee as well, when one reads the position summary and the qualifications and experience, it appears to me like this is 3 jobs that were made into one. And so the person, and I don't think it's been shared with the commission, but you have it, and I think it wouldn't hurt to share it so you'll know what we're looking for. But this person will be responsible for all prevention efforts on campus. So although it came sort of in the spirit of interpersonal violence, it will be about prevention of hazing, alcohol, and drug prevention, mental health. So it's a huge portfolio just in trying to pull together all the different prevention efforts. The person is to engage. Some of the interfaces with our committee include that the person will engage in ongoing assessment of the developmental, social, and environmental factors, as well as root causes that contribute to interpersonal violence, in colleges and universities and at UNC. Another advise senior university leadership on policies, practices, and resources needed to sustain effective prevention initiatives. The person will supervise prevention folks and also has a supervisory role at CAPS or wellness, student wellness. So it's a big portfolio that's both kind of beginning to try to get some synergy of our existing activities and also advance them. And as we know from this committee, prevention, safety takes many forms, and prevention is it's a big portfolio to have. We had a very robust group of candidates, great. As you might imagine, with this broad a job description, a lot of folks saw themselves in different dimensions of the position and brought that. We interviewed, I'm going to say 8 or 9, I'm going to say 9 individuals in Zoom interviews, and we've narrowed that pool to 4 who we're bringing to campus for day-long visits. Obviously, there'll be remote visits. People will be interviewing with various constituencies, excuse me, and there will be an open session in which we've asked we're still working on the prompt, but we've asked the person to share their vision in essence, share their vision about what's needed for prevention, and especially in minoritized groups and in spaces where there can be complex barriers and resistance to true prevention efforts. And also on what they will base their planning. So looking for an evidence-based and their experience to be part of that, come out in that way, and also how they will measure their success. So as soon as we get the dates of and times for these particular sessions, I will ask Emily to share them with the committee, because it would be really important, I think, for all of us to have eyes on that and to give feedback to it. We have 4 great candidates, but they all bring different things. And so my 2 takeaways are the committee, the process is moving forward. We expect, I will say, this is the other thing. This position reports to Amy Johnson, the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, but it has also a dotted, I think, reporting category to EOC, HR, and the Provost's office, which kind of gives you an idea of the, complexity of the position. And so whoever is hired, I really feel they will need our support because they're being handed a lot of work. So my 2 takeaways, happy to answer questions. Interviews will be happening soon. Hope you can come. We'll let you know when they are and who the folks are. And also really would like you to take a look at the job description, because it's it's done, the position's posted, that's great. I just want us as a university to be very careful not to set people up for failure by giving them impossible Sisyphean tasks, especially in this space. And so anything we can do to support the person and help them prioritize, et cetera, I think we should be prepared to do.
Kim, I have a question. You detailed the major areas of responsibility for this senior prevention strategy officer and all the different areas that they would be responsible for. Have you found one, or has the committee seen one? I know that there were 9 and now there are 4. Have you seen in that 4 an individual who encompassed all of those strengths in all of those areas that they could do a great job? Or have one been good in one or such area, and then you decided, okay, they were good in this particular area?
It's a great point. And actually, I only read you a couple. There are 11 elements to the position summary, 11 bullets, including one that's a huge paragraph long. So, but your point's well taken. I think all 9 candidates were great. I think what we were, people whose experience was in intervention or violence response versus violence prevention, probably got less. We looked for people who could be builders, because this person's going to have to, try to help get synergies from our existing processes without, while letting them continue to be effective. But we also look for someone who could lead, because this person's going to have to really work hard to make sure that this doesn't just end up being a checked box and moved on for the university. Okay, we've done something here, this person will take care of it. So, so to answer your question, Devetta, I think if we and we looked for people who understood large public entities, public universities, or metropolitan settings. I would say people that were in smaller privates might not have been, so partly because of that, the needing to navigate complex systems and really to really have a leadership, to be a senior leader. So people that had experience with that, but also really knew the prevention stuff, even if they hadn't been doing prevention for a while.
May I ask how diverse was the applicant pool?
I was recovering from my appendectomy during the initial round of interviews, so I can't tell you the initial pool. We interviewed the people that the group that we interviewed in person, or in the Zoom interviews, was all female, but had at least one candidate of color.
Devetta, could I jump in? Kim, thanks for your work on this. I wanted to ask just one question. Sometimes in a situation like this, there's a sense of finding a person who would provide continuity, and sometimes there's a sense of finding a disruptive individual. Do you have a sense of the committee about that idea of disruption and fixing a problem versus
I think
recognizing a problem?
I think we're pro-disruption, Frank. I think the search committee, people come from a variety of areas on campus, all of whom think we have a problem. We have many problems that need fixing. So we are definitely predisposed to somebody who can take what we've got and build it and advance the cause. So I would say, I'd say we're pro-disruptor, although probably the committee hasn't articulated that as our goal.
And just out of curiosity, or maybe it relates, I think, also to our role in the commission, do people agree on what the problems are, or do people have 10 different problems, each person listing a different problem?
Oh, great point. I mean, there's been a lot of work on this campus about the state of interpersonal violence. I mean, there's the report of a couple of years ago. And I think particularly that advisory committee that LB is chairing which is a diverse and cross-cutting advisory committee. I mean, they've really, I think we agree on the problems, and there may be some that we mean, I think what we are in agreement about is that there aren't enough resources for a really complex issue that reflects societal problems as well as higher ed, campus, community problems. So so I would say that there's, you know, we might, some folks might, you know, be more invested in the prevention, you know, getting the prevention world coordinated and advanced. Other people might, but I think there's not disharmony in we all, I think, are in agreement about the problems, even if we might rate them a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions for Kim on this new position, this new hire? Kim, thank you so much for this detailed report. And and like with Chief, if there are any other updates that we need to be aware of, please continue to keep us apprised of the movement.
Sure, folks, look for something. So Emily, can you send out the, and also look for something from Emily? I would expect within the last week. We're just finalizing the schedule for folks' visits. As you can imagine, there are a lot of people's calendars to coordinate, but in the next week to 10 days, and if you can at all, attend or watch the videos from the sort of community presentations.
And one last question, Kim, when is the start date? When is the date that you want to have this person brought on board?
I think we wanted them to start in July. I think we wanted them to start in July, Devetta, but you know how time is these days.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay. Next up on our agenda is the presentation on student belonging and emotional safety. Dr. Travis Albritton. Dr. Albritton comes to us right here on campus, on UNC's campus. He's a clinical associate professor and the Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at UNC Chapel Hill School of Social Work. He's a two-time recipient of the School of Social Work's Excellence in MSW Advising, and he's been recognized numerous times with the Dean's Recognition for Excellence in Teaching. His research interests include educational equity and closing the educational opportunity gap. Now, I first saw, I've known Dr. Albritton or heard of him for several years, but was really impressed with his work with Dr. Ibram X. Kendi in the fall of last year. And as you can see, we have aligned the speakers for today with our subcommittees. Chief has spoken, Kim has spoken, and what they talked about really aligns with our subcommittees. As such, there are two subcommittees that we've had a little slower movement on. And when I listened to the presentation and the facilitation of Professor Albritton, I thought, and so did Frank and Jim at the moment, because at that time, because he was acting co-chair, we thought Dr. Albritton would be a perfect presenter to come on and help share some information about those two areas, not specifically, but about the emotional safety and well-being of students. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Albritton, and thank you so much for agreeing to come and speak with us today, Dr. Albritton.
Thank you, and good morning to all of you. When I must admit that when Devetta first contacted me about this at the end of last year, I actually tried to get out of it. And I offered her the name of someone else who I thought would be better. And you'll probably be hearing more about that later on. And she very nicely said to me, well, you know, that's great. And we're going to think about that, but we still want you to come. And so here I am. And I had the opportunity to talk with both Devetta and Frank last week about a little bit about what I was going to talk about today. And so I just want to thank both of them for inviting me to have this opportunity to share with you. I just want to talk to you a little bit about kind of where I come, how I come at this topic, and kind of what I bring to this. So when I started out, like just doing my own research and my dissertation work, I was really interested in Black males K through 12, and really more so high schoolers. And so I did my research around perceptions of smartness among high school students, and looking at what the markers and measures of smartness were in terms of what do school districts and schools look at and use to identify smart kids, right? And what did the African American males in my study use to identify smartness? And it was very different. Right. And I think that that impacted how they understood themselves within the context of their own school environment. Right. I've always been interested in this whole notion of belongingness and campus climate, because as a Black faculty member at a predominantly white institution, I have a lot of students of color who come to my office and talk to me about a lot of different experiences that they have had, both in their classes and across campus. My most recent interest in terms of what really kind of brought me back to this work is some colleagues and I just had a paper accepted to advances in social work. And the title of our paper is Social Work Education in the Shadow of Confederate Statues and the Specter of White Supremacy. And one of the things that we do in that paper is, obviously you can probably figure out where the Confederate statues part comes from. But we look at student activism and the work of students to really push conversations as it relates to campus climate and what's happening on campus. And we went back and we looked at some of the work that had been done around Silent Sam here at UNC. And one of the things that really stood out for us is some of the same conversations that folk were having in the 1950s, 60s, 70s. We continue to have those conversations to this very day, right? Obviously, there have been some things that have changed, but there are many things and many issues that continue to bubble up. And so that same group of folks that I'm working with, we actually have just submitted for another paper to kind of continue to talking about some of these issues. So this is work that I find myself getting deeper and deeper into. And so Devetta, said to me that she really kind of wanted me to have a conversation with you all. I did prepare a few slides, only 4, because it will just kind of help guide me and stay on track in terms of making sure that I hit on some of the key issues that I think are fundamentally important. And so I'm going to share my screen with you all. And I'm going to talk about student belonging, but I am going to approach this conversation from the standpoint of racial battle fatigue and campus climate. And I don't know if any of you are there any of you who are familiar with the term racial battle fatigue? Racial battle fatigue, thank you. Okay, I just kind of wanted to see. So racial battle fatigue is a term that was coined by William Smith, who's currently in the Department of Education at the University of Utah, or in the School of Education at the University of Utah. And you can see here the cumulative result of natural race-related stress response due to distressing mental and emotional conditions. These conditions emerge from constantly facing racially dismissive, demeaning, insensitive, and or hostile racial environments and individuals. And one of the things that Smith does is he talks about racial battle fatigue, and he highlights a couple of different areas, including persistent microaggressions. He talks about how it includes both individuals and groups, right? And how it also influences collective group memories. And so I think it's important that we talk about this for just a moment. We talk about microaggressions as being kind of those really subtle verbal and non-verbal insults that are directed at folks of color. And sometimes they happen unconsciously. Now, I trouble the word micro aggressions because I fundamentally believe that what is micro to some people is very macro to other folk. And I think that I think one of the important things that we have to understand is, even as we, and I use the term microaggressions because that's what we use in literature, but I think that we have to understand that for folk of color, right, the constant assault, right, that people of color feel because of these microaggressions, they don't stay micro. They just become aggressions, things that continue to happen over and over and over again. And we see this in classrooms and across campuses. And one of the things that is borne out in the literature, and again, I just want to back up. If you want to go read about these things, there's tons of literature out there that you can read for days. And so with this conversation, I really just want to hit the highlights, right, as I move us towards talking about belonging. But one of the things that consistently came up when you talk about microaggressions, and specifically as it relates to Black males, one of the first questions that Black males on campuses often get is, are you an athlete, or what sport do you play? Right? And this association with the fact that if you're on this campus and you're a Black male specifically, then you must somehow be an athlete, right? Totally dismissing the fact that maybe you're a Morehead Cain scholar or that you're here for some other reason, right? I think another thing that constantly comes up in the literature, and again, I want to be clear that these are themes that really run across the research when you look at research around racial battle fatigue and microaggressions, are students of color being put in classes, students of color in courses where they feel that they are having to speak for the entire race. And so having professors or folks talk about the Black experience, right? Or what do Black folks or what do Latinx folks think about this, right? And as Touré, as the cultural commentator Touré says, if you have 100 Black people in a room, you have 100 different ways to be Black, right? But what happens when you're put in environments, or you're put or conversations are had within the context of classes, and you are expected to be the person or the two people or the three people in the class who speaks for the entirety of the Black experience, right? And that is something that I think that we have to be really conscious and really thoughtful about. And again, this is something else that students tell us that they hear on a consistent basis, going back to the literature. I think when we also talk about racial battle fatigue, we also have to include and think about the fact that microaggression, when you talk about microaggressions, you're talking about groups, individuals, but you're also talking about groups and the impact that these aggressions have on groups of people. And the last piece that you'll see is this whole notion of collective memory, right? And I think that it's important for folks to understand that there is a narrative about UNC among people of color. Right? There is a narrative about predominantly white institutions among folk of color. And what I mean is, who is it that you can go to find support when you get to campus, right? These are some of the things that you are going to face at a UNC, right? Here is where you need to go when you have when there's a problem or there's an issue or there's a concern that needs to be addressed, right? And so I think it's really important, and this ties directly into, and a lot of people don't like to talk about white supremacy and whiteness, but I don't think we can have this conversation about racial battle fatigue without talking about white supremacy and whiteness, right? This ties into a 400-year history of the marginalization and disenfranchisement of people in this country, right? And so when we have the conversation with respect to racial battle fatigue, we have to talk about, one, what's happening in our campus, what's happening in classrooms, what's happening in these individual groups. But we also have to have the conversation from the standpoint of collectively, what are the experiences of people of color, right? Both inside and outside of the institution, and how then does it affect how they move throughout life in general, right? So another piece that I think is really important, so we come to campus climate, and when we talk about campus climate, we're really talking about the overall feel and the structure of a campus that reflects an acceptance or rejection of racial diversity within the environment. And you hear a lot of administrators talk about campus climate, and looking at the research, one of the things that we find is that campus climate really can be discussed in 4 different ways. We can talk about structural diversity, and really what we're looking at there is the numerical representation of different demographic characteristics. So the number of folks of color on your campus, and then obviously when you talk about people of color, that can be broken down in a number of different ways. We also have to think about campus climate in terms of the historical legacy, right? What is the historical legacy of a UNC as it relates to issues related to anti-Black racism, as it relates to issues of campus efforts to really mitigate the impact of racism on campus. Also the psychological climate. And when we talk about psychological climate, again, there we're talking about the perceived notions of hostility, segregation, racism, and tension that are really kind of held among community members. And I think it's important to name the fact there that when we talk about the psychological climate, that's going to be very different depending upon the people that you talk to, right? Obviously, if you talk to folk of color, you might you will probably get one narrative, and dare I say, if you talk to when you talk to different groups, right, of people, so there's the broad narrative of persons of color, right? And then there's that within group difference. And so even if you talk to different groups, there's going to be a very different narrative as it relates to the psychological climate. And then we move to behavioral climate, which really looks at the frequency and the quality of cross-racial interactions, and whether those interactions are characterized as friendly, open, discriminatory, or tense. And again, I think you have to recognize that there's going to be some difference there. One of the things that I think is constantly borne out in the literature when folks talk about campus racial climate is the fact that we often get stuck on structural diversity. Right? We often get stuck on increasing the number of students of color, right? And that is really an important piece. And I often tell folks, however, though, my role in the School of Social Work is Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And oftentimes campuses can do a really, really wonderful job of getting the diversity right. You can look out across campus and see a really diverse group of people. Where we tend to fall short is when it comes to issues of inclusion. Because you can have the numbers, but those folks and the people, you can have several minoritized groups, but if those minoritized individuals do not feel included in the campus in meaningful and intentional kinds of ways, if you're not working to address the historical legacy of racism, if you're not constantly thinking about ways to improve psychological climate and asking what it's going to take to improve both the psychological climate as well as the behavioral climate, then basically what you have is just a mix of different people, and there's still a lot of groups who feel out of place or feel unwanted. And I think that we have to name that fact clearly, and we can talk about that in just a little bit more. Another point that, another key piece that I think is really important to point out is that in 2016, there was a survey done of college presidents across the country, and 55% of those college presidents reported that campus climate was more of a priority than in the 3 previous years. And I think you have to, this survey was done not too long after the death of Mike Brown. And we say death of Mike Brown, and I actually prefer to say murder of Mike Brown, because I fundamentally believe that that's what it was. Also, 75% of college presidents believe that the hashtag Black Lives Matter movement increased campus dialogue. And the other thing that has really come out of research is that campus climate is really seen as a microcosm of the larger US climate, and what's going on within the context of our society in many ways mirrors what we're seeing on our college campuses. And I'm going to stop share just for a moment so I can see faces, because I want to provide just a little bit more information and then really engage in a conversation with folks. And so there are a lot of people who will ask, well, what does this have to do with belonging? And there are a couple of pieces and a couple of connections that I want us to really make here. And the first piece that I think is fundamentally important is one does not start experiencing racial battle fatigue when they are freshmen in college or when they get to a college campus, right? Racial battle fatigue is something that people of color experience all day, every day on a regular basis. Right? Now, and the research around racial battle fatigue has demonstrated, has shown that there is an increase in blood pressure, right? That there are physiological responses that one has to the constant assault on their race and on their being. And so there's much conversation and much more work to be done about the long-term impact that racial battle fatigue has on an individual. And so what we know is that when one comes to a campus, one comes with a history of experiences of racism in this country. So the question then becomes, what are the things that are being put in place to address, right, the very real issues that we know that folk are bringing with them, right? We also have to have the conversation about the fact that, and this is hard for a lot of folks to accept, but our institutions of higher education, as liberal as we may claim that we want, as liberal as we say that they are remnants of white supremacy. UNC was not originally built for people of color. That's why we have so many HBCUs in this country, right? And so we have to grapple with, again, we have to go back and look historically at how certain groups have been excluded over time. And although these institutions, and many people will say these institutions are open now, that is true, these institutions are open now, but that does not mean that these environments are not still hostile to certain groups of people, because we have seen that borne out by the literature over and over and over again. And one of the things that research tells us is that many students believe that oftentimes the diversity efforts on campus are at a surface level, but fail to address the deep issues that are meant to change policy and practices in terms of how people of color are treated. And this is one of the things that Ibram Kendi bears out in his work around anti-racism, right? Talking about how does one address policies and practices designed to uproot racism. And I think that's where I'll leave us, and we can have more of a conversation. Too often, diversity efforts have been focused again towards bringing in different groups of people. And what we know from literature is that you have to bring in different groups of people, but then you also have to be intentional about policy change, right? Designed at helping those individuals feel that they are a part of your campus in meaningful ways, right? So from the admissions process to hiring practices, to how you think about scholarships, opportunities, all of those things have to be considered in really intentional kinds of ways, right? What are policies around policing and how folks are dealt with on campus, and who are people collaborating with and working with? All of these issues have to be considered, right? In order to really have and affect policy change. And if we don't do those kinds of things, then we will continue to replicate some of the issues that we have seen over time. And what we also know, and lastly, what we also know is this looks very different. This looks very different in terms of gender breakdown, right? There has also been a lot of research around African-American male experiences versus the experiences of Black women versus the experiences of Latinx and Native American folks, and we can continue to go down the list. And so there are several different nuanced pieces that we have to break out there as we begin to talk about this whole idea and notion of belonging. So that's just a little bit on racial battle fatigue and campus climate, but I also wanted to leave the opportunity and the room for dialogue and conversation. This is something that I could sit here and do for 3 hours, but recognizing that we don't have that amount of time, I want to create opportunity for a little dialogue.
I would like to say thank you for coming today. And then also, oh my goodness, you were like the inspiration and the fire that I needed this morning. So I'm in the first year of my PhD in nursing program, and I've been looking a lot at Kamara Jones and her Gardner's Tale framework, right, around racism. And I've been listening to Nadine Burke and talk about ACEs and, and cardiovascular health in general. So when I'm listening to you speak this morning, I'm like, yes, this is it. So I just first wanted to say that you are truly an inspiration, and the stuff that you were saying is spot on. And I think it's important. And you have me excited again, because I was feeling a little burdened down this morning. I'm like, yeah, let's do this. So thank you for sharing everything this morning. And now that I've complimented you a million times, I'll just say I look forward to connecting with you outside of this.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
And Letitia, I also hope that this will give you the inspiration. I know that you are one of the co-chairs, or at least one of the members for the one of the subcommittees. And as I stated when we first began this conversation, the two committees, the one on discrimination, inclusion, and belonging, and the one on conditions of racism on African American students, are the two subcommittees that are moving relatively slow, that we want to get some speed, get some speed underneath them. And we figured, Frank and I, that when we get more information, we can do more. When we understand and we know better, we can do better. And Charles, this is for you as well. And Saeed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I am a new member of both of those committees, and hearing your presentation today definitely helped to begin to conceptualize things that we can put on our agenda and how we can move forward and how we can be a part of that change for things here on campus. So I agree, Dr. D, this was definitely awesome, and I'm looking forward to it, because before I was like, okay, what are we doing? Where are we at? And this was like, okay, these are some of the things that we can be targeting and examining and thinking about and looking forward to connect to create a better experience here at UNC.
And Frank, let me just say this. I want you to get in, but before I lose this thought, and even though I called up the names of let's see, Charles and Letitia, this is just not a one race, one ethnic group type of being included and being responsible to these subcommittees. It is the commission's job and responsibility to move all of these subcommittees forward. Just wanted to put that in there as well. Frank?
Well, absolutely. And let me say thank you, Travis, for, that really helpful presentation. And one of the things I want to underscore is your comment about that numerical diversity, or what you called, I think, structural diversity, is not by itself sufficient. It certainly is important to increase numbers. But as you mentioned, changing the culture and making sure that there's a culture and an atmosphere where people truly feel that they belong, that they're included in decision-making, that they're included wholeheartedly in every aspect of the community is really fundamental. And giving those people some kind of empowerment. And to many of us who look like me, that empowerment almost comes automatically, considering that it's an historically white institution, as you say. So I really like that idea. And also I like the fact that you mentioned, you can't just check a box on culture. If we don't create changes in the culture and understand the difficulties of doing so, since there's, as you mentioned, hundreds of years of history in this institution, just like there is in American society more generally, if we can't expect that to be an easy job. And I'm not trying to change the subject, but I do want to say that the first sentence in our mission statement that we're going to talk about under the leadership of Josh Ramiro next on the agenda includes the fact that we recognize the importance of inclusion and belonging. And I think that those cultural aspects are fundamental to the work of this commission. So thank you for your presentation.
May I say to Dr. Davis,
Who is Dr. Davis? Who is Dr. Davis, Pastor? Who is Dr. Davis?
Albright.
Yeah, Albright. Okay.
Dr. Albright.
Okay.
Your presentation actually turned the talk of the tool of the problem tree upside down. The talk is analyzed through what you just said about going beyond pointing out why we should act one way. It shows us the root cause of the reason of the talk and how it moves over into how we become part of the change that calls us to be included in the atmosphere on campus. Growing up around the campus of Chapel Hill and knowing that how we had been approached, that at a certain time we must leave the area because this is not for you. I think about how Coach Smith embraced Charlie Scott and some of the other athletes because there wasn't a space for them to live in, that they had to live outside the campus itself. Haven't much changed to make one feel that they are welcome as part of the narrative of the campus of UNC. You can bring as many people of color, but if you don't change the policy and make fundamental change to make one feel as if they are part of the change. And I often say that because we still see some of the fundamental things still in place in our society. Knowing that here in Orange County, that the culture is a melting pot of culture. But every time you reach out to give information, you do not use the language. You don't bring cultural events that would embrace the wellness of the people that comes on board. You may have a spat here and there, but overall, the fundamental reaching of those is not a part of the process. A little nugget here and a little nugget there is only a band-aid effect. But what you are saying now opens up the doors of more movement to bring forth changes that will be fundamental for the development, not only of the campus, but the city around the campus. And I want to thank you for what you brought today.
Thank you.
I'd also like to, sorry, were you
No,
still
please.
talking?
No, please go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to thank you for your presentation, Dr. Albritton. And a lot of what this has caused me to think about, I do echo the same sentiments as a lot of people on this commission have just spoken to. And I think part of our mission on this commission with regard to discrimination, inclusion, and belonging is really creating substantive recommendations that aren't band-aids and that create this substantive healing and promote a culture of campus safety, inclusion, and wellness for everyone. And with regard to your discussion on racial battle fatigue, where you spoke about how it's this cumulative product of racial stress and the collective history. And I think even in some instances that could be extended to ethnic stress and ethnic history. I'm just curious, what are some of the issues that you've identified on campus, and do you have any thoughts on some substantive actions that could be taken to sort of influence this greater campus culture and maybe provide the committee or the commission a start on like some substantive recommendations that we could go forward exploring?
So I love that question. Thank you so much. And I don't want to say, so I can speak very anecdotally about UNC. I've started in the last couple of months trying to start conceptualizing my own study that would allow me to kind of get into that just a little bit more. But this is what we know, and I especially appreciate you bringing up kind of the whole ethnic piece, because I think that that's sometimes a part that gets left out of the conversations that is really powerful. When we talk about what can be done, so I'm going to share a quick example about one of the things that we've done at the School of Social Work, because we kept having these conversations. And so I work with our diversity committee, work with our generalist committee. And our generalist committee is a committee of instructors who teach in the first year MSW experience. And that's in the first year MSW experiences includes generalist courses that all of our 2- and 3-year MSW students take. And we went back and we looked at what we were teaching, and we included more critical theories. So we included more critical race theory. We included lat crit. We included feminist theories. We are working to include more indigenous knowledges into the generalist courses. And the whole purpose there is to center the experiences of people of color, right? And to make those experiences central to the kinds of conversations that we're having. So I think one of the things that I think is really important for UNC to think about, right? And obviously undergraduate programs are much larger than individual schools. So I think one of the things that individual schools have to do is think about what are we replicating? And how can we look at our curriculum? How can we look at the things that we do? And how can we center perspectives and ideas that are normally not heard? And how can we acknowledge their value? So that's the first thing. Then in the undergraduate experience, I think you have to ask yourself the same question, right? and say, what are the mechanisms that, or what are the experience that the majority of our students have, and what can we have and expose folks to? Because this is not just about exposing, Black folks to critical race theories, right, and Latinx populations to Lat crit. This is exposing everybody and changing the conversation and saying we're not going to use the same starting spot. We're going to start very differently. I think that's the first thing. The second recommendation that I would have if it were me is we have to have people in positions, right, who represent, right, different backgrounds, right? We have to be willing, from the chancellor's office all the way down, who do you have in position, right? And it has to be more than a token few. It has to be people who are really going to come at this from a very different place, right? That's another thing. Thirdly, and then I could go on with this, and I know you all have other things, but I think another important thing to say so I'm a faculty member, right? So I have a PhD, so I can say this, right? I think that we PhDs know what we know really, really well. We know our subject area. We know those things that we've studied and we have a lot of information about. And sometimes I think we get our degrees, and some of us can think more highly of ourselves than we ought, right? And so part of what we have to be willing to do is we have to be willing to avail ourselves to the very real reality that we don't know how to have certain conversations, and that we need to be open to expertise and folk who can help guide us through how to have conversations about race and about belonging and about issues of equity and about issues of justice, right? And we have to create spaces, and we have to demand of our faculty, right, that they participate in these things. And when you start talking about demanding things, faculty's heckles go up, right? You don't tell me what to do, academic freedom. Right. Well, we have to start being more insistent. And when we hire people, we have to think about who we're hiring and what kind of knowledge they bring in. And what can this hire do to change the conversation? Which then means we got to have a different metric for how we talk about promotion and how we talk about tenure and how we talk about all of these other things. And so now let me acknowledge, Josh, that what I just said is a heavy lift. But if you're truly interested in really changing the narrative, and if you're truly interested in being inclusive, you really don't have a choice. Because the way that you start reproducing what you've already got, right, is you start interjecting different kinds of perspectives. You start hearing and listening to different folks, right? You start looking outside of that box that you've created that says this is who we are and what we do. So I hope that answers your question in some part, in some way.
Yeah, I found it really helpful, and I took lots of notes. So I'm definitely going to be connecting with Letitia and OJ and Devetta and everyone to continue to discuss a lot of what you spoke about. So thank you.
Travis, Jim Harrington here. I was previously next door at the School of Public Health with folks, good folks like OJ and others. So I didn't get a chance to meet you, but I retired last December. I do appreciate your comments. I think they're really insightful. And I think that what you said really hits the nail on the head, in that you have to have an investment from the top if things are going to change from the status quo. And if we look at the top of the UNC system, the Board of Regents, the Board of Governors, on down, you don't have that. It still exemplifies, the old traditional UNC. And I think that's true of many many universities, public universities across the US, it's very threatening what you said to some leaders who want to maintain the status quo. And there has to be some way to engage them so that that threat is minimized and they recognize the benefit. And I think that's the real, in my view, in my experience, has been that's extremely difficult. And I've been on selection committees for faculty and seen the outcome of some of these selection committees, and it's been truly disappointing. You know, I come from a Native American background. Very few Native Americans on campus. We have some great ones though, but I'll tell you that it's not a place that folks from Cherokee or Lumbee necessarily want to come to UNC Chapel Hill because the support is not exactly there. I mean, it's there. We have a good support system, but you know, from the top down, it's not very supportive, to be frank. So I really appreciate your comments. You're very thoughtful, and I think it helps us as a safety commission think about where we are in trying to have a more inclusive and sense of belonging. Really, we've talked about this before. There's been some pushback on that against our commission's recommendations, but I think it's what you're saying really resonates well. So I do appreciate your comments. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jim. I would just say, one of the things I think you're right in so many different ways, and sadly, I think that there's some who don't always recognize how sticking with the status quo is detrimental all the way around, right? But to your last point about the commission's recommendations, I have come to learn that one of the things that we have to be willing to do when we are asked to undertake serious efforts like this is to make the recommendations and stand firmly on them, and then work to really build the broad support of people who also feel the same way. Right? I have this saying, and when I took this position, I said, this is how I'm going to approach my work. I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm not. If your mind is changed, I think that's really wonderful. I'm not going to put my efforts on changing your mind and trying to get you not to be so entrenched. I'm going to build coalitions of people around me, and I'm going to be really intentional about those areas where I can effect change. And I'm going to bring people forward who have a vision that is much more inclusive. Right? And I'm going to find ways to make sure that people who feel this way but don't have a platform have a platform. And over time, you will find yourself in the minority, if you will. Now, let me say, I am not so naive as to think that people don't do whatever they need to do to keep their entrenched power. And I need to just name that, right? I don't want to be naive here, right? In terms of having this conversation. But I think when you have a commission like this with folks from all over campus who represent many different ideas and many different perspectives, I think you tell your leadership, this is what needs to happen, this is what needs to be done, and then you find ways to continue to hold them accountable for it, even when they don't want to accept it. And so you build from all different avenues and all different places. And it becomes not just the commission talking to the leadership, but it becomes people from all corners of the campus talking to the leadership. And any good leader will recognize, hopefully, that, oh, I better pay attention to this. Right? Because it's now going to impact my ability to lead. And I recognize that this is being live streamed, and I recognize that people might interpret this in a number of different ways. That's okay. I think you have to be willing to say what you have to say if you are going to be intentional about making change. And so I really do appreciate that piece. And then just the last piece, when you talk about Native American backgrounds, I think it's really, really interesting. If I'm not mistaken, we have one of the largest Native American tribes east of the Mississippi River, right here in North Carolina. And so then the question becomes, why is there not much more engagement in terms of why don't people feel comfortable? Right? We have a treasure of, never mind. I'm gonna stop because there's a lot I could say about that, but I'm gonna stop.
That's great. Thanks a lot.
Where do we want to go? I mean, Frank, you have anything to close this out? This has just been wonderful. And I know, Dr. Albritton, you stated that you could go on for 3 hours. I believe it. And I believe as much as you could go on for 3 hours, this commission here would probably have questions for you and want to be engaged more. So I believe that we could go on, which I think is a really good stopping place based on our forward movement for the rest of the semester that we will share with you at a different time. But thank you so much.
You're certainly welcome, and I'm certainly willing to participate in ways that you all feel most appropriate in the future. So just thank you so much.
Travis, I'm going to nominate you for a tour of all the faculty meetings across the entire College of Arts and Sciences, one department at a time.
Hey, all right, let's do it.
I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, so I'm not sure I'll try that place.
Well, thank you all so much. It was great
Thank you so much.
To be invited and to have this forum to share in this conversation. And in all seriousness, I'm willing to kind of have this conversation in whatever forms you all think is most appropriate. You can probably tell. I'm going to tell people what I feel. I'm going to be respectful, but I'm not going to hold it back because to do so is to be untrue to what I was hired to do. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Albritton. If you'd like to stay, you can. If not, if you'd like to leave, because we have another part of the meeting, you can do that as well. We're just so happy that you were here with us today. Thank you.
I'm gonna jump on off and go disrupt something else. Okay.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
All righty. Well, next on the agenda is Josh.
Let me raise a point of order before Josh starts, if you don't mind, Josh. Emily wrote that we may be getting close to the loss of a quorum, and I just wanted to verify whether or not we have 16 members and we have 8 present. So in my count, I just want to double check that we're okay for taking a vote because we have to have half.
I don't know how Devetta and I landed on 10.
Oh, we had 10 before.
Yeah, we had 10 before.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. So we should be good then.
I think we have 16 members listed on the website, and so we have 8 present. So we're okay to take votes. Just wanted to verify that.
Okay, thank you, Frank.
Yep.
Thanks for confirming that. So obviously there's been a lot of work put into this Constitution by a lot of different people on the commission. And some of the updates that I wanted to share with everyone today before we voted and had some further discussion maybe before we vote are just some of the updates that have been added since my last presentation. I don't think it's necessary to share my screen at this point, so I'm just sort of going to speak to the types of friendly edits and amendments that have been made to the Constitution. From Professor Baumgartner, we added language surrounding the crisis of trust that wasn't in the former draft of the Constitution. We also edited some of the rules regarding the number of co-chairs from 3 to 2 or 3 because of the fact that we only currently have 2. Just took care of some of the redundancies that didn't necessarily add much substance, and changed a lot of the voting procedures except for constitutional amendments to just a simple majority to ensure that our business can be conducted more smoothly and more in line with the feelings of the commission as a whole. And we actually ended up taking out the bylaws section because a lot of what was in the bylaws seemed to cover pretty comprehensively what was already earlier in the Constitution. And then there were also some edits and suggestions from Dr. DeVetta. And I believe that those suggestions were trying to see where
Specific, under specific duties.
Yeah.
Was one, and then gaining membership was the other.
Yeah. Okay. I see. So from what I see is we added as part of the specific duties just to promote and or facilitate campus programming, which undergirds the overall safety and well-being of UNC students, staff, and faculty. I don't know if that language was changed later on, but that is the gist of what was added. And regarding gaining membership, we just added members that are unable to attend meetings due to like a change in their duties as staff. They can rescind their membership for up to a semester until they're able to resume regular meeting times. Was it only a semester?
Actually, Josh, that was edited a little bit, and it actually reads, the latest revision was members whose schedule will not allow regular participation in scheduled meetings may suspend their membership in the commission for 1 semester until they are able to resume regular meeting times.
Okay, yeah. So that's the more updated version. And I see personally, I have no problem with that amendment. I think it's a good one. And then the last thing that Professor Baumgartner suggested was surrounding the selection of co-chairs. I personally had a little bit, I don't know if I would say necessarily a different view, but I thought it was worth discussing whether or not as a commission, we would like to take point in potentially voting for or nominating people to be co-chairs in the future. And that might be contingent or require the chancellor's approval after the fact. But I know currently the way that we're situated, it's simply the chancellor's role to designate who the co-chairs are. But I feel like as members of the commission, it might warrant discussion as to whether or not we should be the ones who are sort of recommending to the chancellor for confirmation who we would like to see as co-chairs of the commission. So I guess with that, does anyone have any thoughts on that, whether or not it should be something that's more just left up to the chancellor, or it could be something that maybe we play a more active role in and make a recommendation to the chancellor to approve?
Can I ask a question about it, Josh? First of all, let me say thanks so much for all your work on writing these bylaws and this constitution. It's very helpful for us, and a little bit embarrassing that no one else thought of it. We should have our own rules. So thank you for taking the initiative. The other thing I want to, just an aside, I want to make sure everybody's clear on a change that was put in at the end. It's in the very first statement of Article 2, Section 1. The Campus Safety Commission was created in response to crisis of trust. Restoring trust by fostering an environment of inclusion and belonging for all members of the campus community is therefore fundamental to the mission of this commission. Now that speaks directly to something that Jim mentioned just earlier today, that this has previously been an object of some controversy on the commission itself, and this would put an end to that controversy. So I just want to make sure that nobody feels that they've been blindsided by a change, and the notion of inclusion and belonging is now in there. On the issue that Josh raised, I wanted to ask this question in Article 3, Section 4. It says about removal of officers. And I take officers to mean co-chairs rather than members. So I think that it's possible that if the chancellor appointed somebody that the commission disagreed with, we could remove them as co-chair by a vote of 2/3 of the commission members. I just want to verify. Josh, is that your understanding?
Yeah, now that you point that out, I do think that that was referring to co-chairs as well as subcommittee chairs. But that can be amended based on what the consensus is regarding whether or not that should also pertain to the subcommittee chairs.
I have a question about the under section 3 for gaining membership. When it says regular participation in meetings or maybe suspended, how do you define regular participation or attendance?
Good question, Letitia, because there's no dedicated number that is associated with what regular participation is. Obviously, we cannot have a really functional meeting and have votes if we don't have a quorum. And we have witnessed that at least one time. And we've come close to that on other occasions. And so this is how this came about. I guess we do need to put maybe some numbers to that so that to qualify and to clarify what we're talking about.
I think our wish is that people will voluntarily suspend their membership if they know for a fact that they won't be able to make any of the meetings for a certain period of extended period of time, that we should suspend. And the suspension would simply be that the quorum would go down by one, the quorum requirement, that we shouldn't, if we have, for example, I think there's 3 people right now on the commission who can't make our meetings. So automatically we have an absenteeism of 3. And my view is that this would allow us to ask those people voluntarily to suspend their membership. We could make it stronger by saying that the co-chairs could suspend their membership whether they like it or not. But we haven't done that in this report. So Letitia, that's a good question. It's a little bit ambiguous, but our goal is to have something about if we know for a fact you can't really make the meetings, then for one, you shouldn't be appointed if that's going to be impossible for you to participate. And for 2, if you are appointed, you could suspend, and hopefully we hope that people would fix their schedules so that they could participate.
So
do we want to put a number to that? I'm sorry, Jim.
Just a suggestion around Frank's comment. Could you make that more explicit such that if a member has to desires to suspend because of medical reasons or other reasonable situations, that the quorum required for meetings would be such that it would not include that person in the denominator, or something. That's way too wordy, but some language to that effect. So there's no question about what a quorum would be if there was ever dispute regarding members who suspend themselves because of some reasonable, medical or other situation.
Yeah, I think we should make it explicit so that there is never an ambiguity about whether we have a quorum or not.
I agree, because I definitely hear concerns about having the quorum, and I know that that's very important for us to get things done. And I definitely hear some sensitivity and consideration being given to schedule changes or unforeseen circumstances that people are outside of people's control. I just think that as it's written, it's very subjective and ambiguous. And I wonder if we achieve what we set out by including it as it's written. I just think a little bit of clarification would be helpful to just quantify ideally what that would look like.
So I'd just like to propose that we move forward. I could share I could share my screen, and maybe we can go through the 3 parts of the Constitution that we've highlighted and come to a consensus on what we would like to see there. If that sounds good to everyone.
That's fine with me.
Okay.
Emily, can you allow Josh to share a screen?
Yeah, Josh, you should have permission. There you go.
Okay, perfect. So would we like to start towards the end of section 3 of Article 3, or would we like to go down and continue the conversation about the quorum? I think either one's fine.
I think go back up to the previous one because the quorum is not problematic. It's who counts in the numerator. I mean,
Yeah.
denominator.
Well, the quorum number said of all commission members, so we'll have to change it of like to all active commission members, something like that. But regarding,
May I ask, now, so you said all commission members versus active commission members, when all commission members should be active, unless they have shared that they wanted to suspend their membership. To me, there is no active membership and inactive unless you are suspending your membership.
yeah, I think that we would have to clarify that though, because it might be interpreted in the sense that even inactive members are still considered members. I don't know if there's a consensus or thought on that, but that's my interpretation of it, or at least how I would have read it.
My interpretation is that there are two things that we're looking at in the document, and that one, originally it sounds as if this is a voluntary action that the commission member voluntarily suspends their membership. But I think what the conversation that we're having is you can keep that, but then there's also this recommendation from the body that commission member that is unable to make meeting, that there's this recommendation that they suspend their membership. And so I think that language has to be in there to make the distinction.
I agree. I think that one way that we can make it more simple is just in this sense where we write members whose schedule will not allow regular participation. We can just add a sentence after that. If a member is unable to participate and suspends their membership, the quorum number will decrease by 1. Or for each member that suspends their membership, the quorum in a given semester, the quorum number will decrease by 1.
I'm gonna put in the chat a proposed new wording, and it's open to discussion. I just trying to be explicit. You know, and to Letitia's question, how much, absenteeism is too much? I don't know the exact number, but I just put in some possible numbers for us to talk about. This would just be an additional bullet point in that section.
May I ask a question? When we're looking at semesters, we're talking about September through December as a semester, or are we looking at the entire school year? Because we did have some meetings throughout the summer. In a semester, there are only 4 months: September, October, November, December. If you miss 3 of those meetings during that semester, you've effectively missed.
Yeah, so let's change it. We could change it to 2.
Yeah, let's do 2
across the entire academic year.
Yeah.
Is that?
Let's do that.
And also I want to note that, the language that I just proposed here is much stricter. It says shall have their membership suspended. It's not voluntary.
I will agree with that.
Can we also include a sentence of some nature that also speaks to that, something along the lines of, case by case evaluation or something where there's, I don't know if I'm just being too nice, but some sensitivity around, like, there are some things that may occur, which is understanding, but these are the guidelines kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that we would say, Letitia, to be a little more friendly, if that's the point, that if they can make it, they're welcome to come, and the quorum increases by 1.
No,
That
it's not really, oh, sorry. It's not about like sounding more friendly. I just also want to just make it so, yeah, I do agree the way it's written is more clear. And I like the guidelines that have been set, but I also just want to include that although we want to reach quorum and we do have important works that need to be done, we also understand that things do come up. So say if it's something medical or whatever, like case by case evaluation will be done kind of thing, and not just kind of like, this is what it is.
Well, Letitia, maybe we could say something like, they're welcome to come to any meeting that they're able to attend, even when their membership is otherwise suspended. And if they do come, then the quorum increases by one. So that they're welcome, they're still members, they're welcome to participate if their schedule allows or their medical condition allows.
Frank, if their membership has been suspended, then they are not allowed to vote. I
Well,
mean, you're either suspended or you're not suspended. I think we're getting,
If I can make a recommendation, I think an easy way out of this is just that after 2 missed meetings, that there's an evaluation of that member's, the commission, their membership.
So, yeah,
obviously that.
Something along those lines, maybe just saying, if members' schedules will not allow participation in 2 meetings during a semester or 5 in the academic year, there shall be a review by the co-chairs that might result in a membership suspension until their schedule allows regular participation.
I just think that allows for the sensitivity that Letitia was talking about.
That's fine, but then we have to say that the co-chairs have the ability or the authority to suspend that membership if.
Yeah.
Right, OJ?
Say that once again, Frank.
That the co-chairs would have the authority to suspend the membership of anyone who misses 2 meetings and may not be able to participate in future meetings. But it's not.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying that. I'm just saying that the document, what I think people are saying, and I don't want to put words in anyone, but I think it's more palatable if you're not saying this is automatic. You miss 2 meetings and then your membership is suspended. I think that you miss 2 meetings and there's an evaluation, or there's and I think from there that could take over any insensitivity. There may be, as you all mentioned, a medical condition that really want to continue to serve, and then there might be some discretion that's get based on whatever the evaluation is, as opposed that they've missed 2 meetings, it's automatic. That's basically what I'm saying.
Does this
I think Josh has some language there.
Yeah, I wrote in, and this is obviously subject to change, but if a member whose schedule will not allow participation in 2 meetings during a semester or 5 in the academic year, they shall have their membership reviewed by the co-chairs, which may result in suspension until their schedule allows regular participation in the commission's work. Those with suspended membership shall not be counted in calculating a quorum.
I like it.
Yeah.
I want to change one little thing I'll put in the chat.
Oh, shall. Is that what you were referring to?
It's the first couple words.
Okay.
And then this would allow us to delete the previous bullet point.
Yes.
I think the second bullet point underneath the one we just finished revising kind of speaks to what Frank was saying about the officers, like the discretion of the committee to remove them from that position. Because it says in the next following bullet that officers may be removed from their position by failure of completing required tasks. And regular meeting attendance is a required task. So I think that also kind of speaks to that.
Yeah.
Josh, does this thing mean that you couldn't vote out the co-chairs or the subcommittee chairs because you disagree with the direction that they're taking? Only if they simply don't do the work?
That was what it was originally intended to mean, but again, these are all subject to being further amended if the commission wants to consider another proposal.
I think it would simplify if we just said officers may be removed from their position by a 2/3 vote of the commission. That is, for whatever reason, 2/3 of the commission members feel they can remove an officer, and then we should specify that the meaning of officer is co-chair of the commission or co-chair of one of the subcommittees.
Yes.
And that they would not be removed from the commission. They would just lose their leadership position.
Mm-hmm.
But for what reasons though? So what we're eliminating is from the position by failure of completion of the required task. Are you deleting that? Because to me, there should be some clarity as to what would create, what would cause or inform the decision to be made for removal.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. And I think that this is something that the commission will have to debate whether or not it should only be for failure to complete required tasks, or if it should be simply a 2/3 vote from the commission. And that can be extended to any instance in which the commission or 2/3 of the commission doesn't believe that the officer isn't fit to be in that position. I think that the fact that a 2/3 vote to remove someone seems like it would be quite rare would probably warrant just leaving it up to a 2/3 vote and keeping it more general. I think that would be a very hard vote to pass if it were for something other than that individual failing to complete required tasks.
In my view, it's better practice to leave, not to try to predict all the possible reasons why we might want to remove somebody and leave it completely open. But we should specify that they're not kicked off the commission. They're just removed from their leadership position. And then that means co-chair of the commission or co-chair of one of the subcommittees.
That's perfectly fine with me if that seems to be okay with everyone else. And I see that, I think Letitia, yeah, Letitia has to leave soon. So I don't know if we'll have the opportunity to vote before, or maybe before Letitia leaves, we can decide upon this and then vote if that doesn't feel rushed to everyone.
I do have a meeting that begins at 11, or that began at 11.
Yeah, I have to also leave. Can I make a friendly proposal that we have a vote at our next meeting? Given we had a lot of discussion today, would that be fair? And members could watch the video if they haven't been able to attend, and then can make a informed judgment about voting at the next meeting?
I think that's a reasonable thing. My only thing that I would like to see if we could agree upon, at least now, that could be potentially discussed before we vote, is deciding upon this language. That way that we can send a most revised copy to everyone to review. Yeah. And I think that's as simple as deciding whether or not someone can only be removed because of failure of completion of their tasks, or because of a 2/3 vote.
I'm in agreement with that.
So for the sake of time, I'd like to propose that we just change the language to officers can be removed by a 2/3 vote from the commission, excluding the officers who would be removed by the vote. Does that seem all right with everyone? or are there any objections to that language?
Yeah,
I
I
like
would-
it, and I added something also in the chat to add, to clarify that they retain their membership in the commission, and that by leadership position, we mean co-chair of the commission or of a subcommittee.
I agree.
I agree as well.
Okay, so let me alter this then. So I'm going to remove this sentence about only being removed because of failure to complete required tasks. And then if everyone's all right with that, I'm just going to leave this in for removal of officers.
Mhm.
Okay.
Good to me.
And I guess that's where we can leave it in terms of the Constitution today. And I'll make sure that it gets out to everyone, and hopefully we can vote on it during the next meeting.
Yes.
Josh, quick question to my comment in the chat. Are we also making edits to the chancellor selects the co-chairs of the commission to recommendations are made to the chancellor by members of the committee? I didn't see it highlighted.
I think that
that's in there
that's
somewhere.
an amendment.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that actually I can't see any more. I'm like looking to see if there's a section about recommending individuals for the commission, but I think that could potentially be an amendment that we add next time before we vote. But I don't want to keep us too much longer over, because I know that our meeting was supposed to end at 11. So I just want to be respectful of everyone's time, because I feel like I've already gone over time.
This is the fastest debate about a constitution ever. So I think you're doing a good job, Josh. And
Wonderful job, Josh.
yeah.
Great work. Thanks so much, Josh.
Thank you.
I think we can add this to the next agenda, and hopefully there won't be too much discussion, and be able to approve it.
That sounds great. And I guess with that, I don't know, it doesn't seem like we'll have time to discuss any of the other agenda items. So I'd like to make a motion to adjourn, if that's all right with everyone.
I second.
Yes.
All in favor?
All right. See you all soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for all your work. Bye-bye.
Good seeing you all.
See you in March.
You all.